In the decades after the Second World War, the world watched as nations turned their eyes upward, toward the stars. The new era of spaceflight promised glory, scientific breakthroughs, and a reprieve from the petty squabbles of earthly politics. But behind the gleam of rockets and the hush of mission control lay a more unsettling question: what happens when humanity leaves the safety of the ground and steps into a void that humbles even the most ambitious minds? The Soviet space program, born from a nation tempered by war and sharpened by secrecy, carried within its wings not only scientific ambition but also the shadows of fear, fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of what the night beyond Earth might reveal about us. From the earliest days of launch, the USSR defended a narrative of inevitability and control. Yet every successful orbit was followed by whispers, telemetry glitches that vanished into error codes, radio transmissions that went silent at the edge of the atmosphere, and faces inside cramped spacecraft that carried not just experiments but the heavy weight of a nation's hopes. The night sky, once a canvas for myths, became a new theater for dread. In the quiet corridors of design bureaus and the loud roar of engines, engineers and cosmonauts carried a double burden: to push the frontiers of science and to guard the fragile belief that there would be order and predictability in the heavens. Soviet space horror does not rely solely on fictional monsters or campfire legends. It grows from real moments when the line between triumph and tragedy blurred. It is the fear of a telemetry blackout during a critical maneuver, the dread that accompanies a seconds-long deviation that could cascade into catastrophe, and the unsettling possibility that some mysteries must remain classified, sealed behind layers of paperwork, bureaucracy, and state security. In the public imagination, these moments might fuse with rumors: the rumor of a shadow satellite that appeared on radar only to disappear, or a misinterpreted signal that suggested phenomena beyond human comprehension. In truth, much of what fuels horror is not merely what happened, but what could have happened, and what the human mind, under stress, is capable of conceiving when faced with the vast, indifferent dark of space. The goal of this exploration is not to sensationalize pain or to indulge in conspiracy. It is to illuminate the complex dialectic between awe and fear that characterizes human space exploration, especially within a system where secrecy was not a choice but a state mechanism. We will listen to the quiet voices of engineers, pilots, and scientists who stood at the edge of the void, and we will examine how culture, politics, and science interweave to create narratives that are as much about us, here on Earth, as they are about or beyond it. The USSR's ventures into space are a testament to human curiosity and resilience, but they also remind us that every leap into the unknown carries the possibility of a haunting echo, an afterimage in the mind of those who watched from ground control, a rumor that refuses to die, a nightmare that lingers in the margins of history. As we move through the episodes of this journey, through glitches and silences, through the voices of cosmonauts heard in bursts and then swallowed by the void, we will ask: what remains when a mission ends in silence, or when a discovery is too dangerous to share? How does fear shape the language we use to describe the cosmos? And what can we learn from the Soviet experience about navigating ambition, risk, and memory in the pursuit of knowledge that belongs to all of humanity? In the quiet hours after a launch, when the roar of engine subsides and the world holds its breath, the Soviet space program does not simply belong to the annals of science. It lives in the moments between telemetry signals, in the gaps where data should be, and in the faces of engineers who listen to the air between the blips. This is the story of the nightmares that whispered through mission control and the void beyond Earth that seemed to answer with its own indifferent silence. Historical context has shown us that ambition travels with risk, that secrecy sits beside discovery like two dancers locked in a shadowed embrace. The early victories, Sputnik, Vostok, the first humans in orbit, were celebrated with parades and the glow of triumph. Yet beneath the triumph lay a pressure cooker, the imperative to perform, to prove ideological superiority, and to protect every step with layers of classification. The public saw clarity, the working mind saw complexity, ambiguity, and the constant threat of a single wrong turn spiraling into catastrophe. Case study A: telemetry anomalies at the edge of control. The clock starts at liftoff, climbs through acceleration, and steadies into the delicate ballet of ascent. Then comes the moment of orbital insertion, when a few stray data packets refuse to follow the script. They arrive with delays, vanish for minutes, and reappear with a different cadence. The flight controllers in their glow-lit rooms face a chorus of numbers that do not align with expectation. Is this a sensor fault, a software hiccup, or something beyond the ordinary? An unseen conversation with the vacuum itself? The team responds with a methodical patience, isolate the anomaly, confirm readings with redundant channels, and push back against the temptation to overreact. The decision to proceed, or to pause, rests on the balance between caution and conviction. For days the mystery persists, and the room holds its breath as engineers debate the meaning of every blip, every quiet interval, and every moment when the spacecraft seems to shout in code that only a trained ear can interpret. The fear is not only of a possible failure but of losing the human voice inside the machine, of handing command to a system that can outpace human judgment. Case Study B, Unreported Satellites and the Shadow Fleet. Rumors, once seated, feed on the public's imagination the way frost feeds on a window pane. The idea of unreported satellites, of objects circling the Earth in increments unknown to observers outside a tightly sealed circle, becomes a fiction that feels almost plausible. The official record may list a clean set of launches and demonstrations, but gaps linger, orbital tugs of unknown purpose, decoys designed to mislead, instruments hidden behind nomenclature that sounds always just out of reach. Radar tracks sometimes reveal oddities, satellites that appear briefly, drift, and vanish, trajectories that whisper of experiments unrelated to public science. Enthusiasts and observers may claim to glimpse anomalies, silhouettes in the black that refuse to yield a concrete explanation. For researchers, the task is to distinguish plausible interpretations from fantasy, to ask whether the gaps indicate more than bureaucratic caution and whether there are truths that must remain guarded to preserve safety, security, or national interest. Case Study C, The Loneliness of Space and the Mind in Isolation. The cosmonaut is no stranger to danger when facing microgravity and the vacuum. Yet the emptiness within the cabin, the prolonged separation from home, the microdrama of daily routines performed in confinement, can become a landscape of its own. Sleep cycles fragment, time dilates, the boundary between identity and mission role blurs. Ground control, far away, connected by a string of signals, offers reassurance in bursts, but the sustained separation carves a hollow within the human psyche. The horror here is intimate, a mind negotiating the vastness of space while wrestling with questions of purpose, memory, and belonging. When astronauts listen to their own breathing in the stillness, they hear not only their bodies but the echo of their civilization's expectations pressing in from behind the helmet visor. The narrative becomes a meditation on resilience, cohesion under strain, and the fragile boundary between collective endeavor and solitary fear. Case Study D, Catastrophes, Near Misses, and Public Fear. Disaster is the sharp punctuation in any history of exploration. In the Soviet arc, the record includes both celebrated recoveries and moments when the margin between success and catastrophe narrowed to a hairline, moments sometimes kept from public view, sometimes told in hushed tones years later. Each near miss leaves an aftertaste of dread, the realization that the sky is not as friendly as it seems, that equipment can fail in ways that no procedure fully anticipates, and that memory itself may become a repository for what could have been. The public-facing story emphasizes discipline, redundancy, and courage. Yet the private record reveals a more intricate truth, that fear and caution coexist with ambition, that every revision of procedure carries the weight of lives lived and lives possibly spared. The culture of spaceflight becomes, in this sense, a living haunting, where the past warns the present and the future whispers what might still go wrong. Visual imagery guide close-ups of analog telemetry panels bathed in backlit glow, with lines of code flickering. Silent, empty corridors of design bureaus, where a single engineer sits with a headset and a distant glow on the horizon of a monitor. Artist-rendered silhouettes in shadowed control rooms, the glow of screens casting faces into chiaroscuro. Launch pads captured in vintage photography, color-graded to emphasize cold blues and steel grays. Abstract spacescapes that convey vast silence, punctuated by the occasional trace of an unwitnessed satellite. Tone and narrative approach. The narration balances documentary precision with atmospheric suggestion. It acknowledges verifiable dates, mission names, and organizational structures while allowing the mind to linger on the emotional underside of exploration, the fear, the awe, and the moral weight of secrecy. The aim is a documentary horror fusion rather than sensationalism, inviting the viewer to consider how fear and curiosity drive humanity toward the unknown.